I was hanging on with my fingernails and my fingers hanging onto the rock and the dirt, and I knew that I was in trouble.
I hear a yell and see her hand, and she's falling down the cliff, down to the other big falls.
I figured that that was it. And anyway, and there's all those crazy thoughts that run through your head. And the first thought that ran through my head was, I don't want to die.
And yeah, it was so unexpected.
Well, we could hear them calling for help.
Well, we're fairly limited with options.
And how everybody says that you see light at the end of the tunnel when you have a near-death experience. I didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel. It was just black. My name is Maureen LaFleche. On May 2nd, 2021, I went for a hike to West Nile Creek, which is north of Qualicum Bay, with my good friends Ike, Marion, and Marion's son Nolan. It was a beautiful May day, and we were just marveling at the wildflowers that were out in bloom.
Well, actually, I was outside working on my doing drainage around my barn, which is one of those jobs that's in the horse pastures, and when you start it, you can't finish.
So it was beautiful, and we had our lunch at the final falls. And then after lunch, we decided to go back down.
The wildflowers were gorgeous. And so we were just, with our iPhones and taking pictures of the flowers and walking along.
Coming down a rocky area, we had to be kind of careful, but there were so many patches of dogwood and just lots of we were looking at.
So I had actually just kind of knelt down to take a picture of a flower, and then
suddenly I hear a yell and see her hand.
And I was hanging on with my fingernails and my fingers hanging onto the rock and the dirt, and I knew that I was in trouble. And
she's falling down the cliff, down to the other big falls. And yeah, it was so unexpected.
Or the trail actually had given away, and I had fallen 30 feet.
Yeah, I looked over and
then I looked at my friend's face, and she was just had that look of horror on her face, and there's all those crazy thoughts that run through your head. And the first thought that ran through my head was, I don't want to die. And then I thought, well, that's a negative, right? So I'm going to have to reframe that. And it was like, I want to live. And then everything goes black. And how everybody says that you see light at the end of the tunnel when you have a near-death experience. I didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel.
We didn't know what to do. I was getting more and more nervous and afraid because she was sitting in water.
And then I woke up with my face in the water. I was in a V position and my arms were up behind me, and I guess I had slumped over, and it was the water, the cold water on my face that had woken me up. And then I just checked my fingers and checked my toes, and my friends were looking down at me, and
she couldn't really speak, but she could hear me, she could respond.
They were asking me questions, but I couldn't yell up. I knew that I had assumed I had punctured my lungs.
But she was sitting in water, and I knew I had to get out of the water.
I tried signing to them because I had to do some signing, and that didn't help because neither one of them actually understood signing.
And in the meantime, there were 3 students from VIU that had come up and saw. I got the one fellow to help me. He just kind of held my hand while I could get down to a part where I could actually find a purchase to stand on, and I got down to help Maureen.
So my other friend was there getting cell service and getting search and rescue.
Well, Ray got his 2 pals to be a human chain and help him down, and so Ray and I managed to lift her up out of the water. I knew she was having trouble breathing. She couldn't breathe that then, so I knew something was amiss. It was just the game of waiting.
And then the shadows from the from the rocks, right, started to come in, and it started to get cooler. And that's when I started to think, like, when is search and rescue coming? Ike was up top signal, and she was able to contact 911, and we knew that search and rescue was on its way.
We tumbled our way through the bush to get down to the trail.
My faith never waned, right? It's like I always knew that you guys were coming. When search and rescue arrived, the first person down was Don.
Oh my gosh, we were so grateful. He was there, and
Nick came down, and they had the clamshell, and they put that underneath my body and connected it together.
And Dawn and Ray and I, very challenging, but we obviously managed. There was just no room.
The packaging down at the bottom was challenging.
And that was quite uncomfortable. That was my first, besides from being pulled out of the water, that was the second time that was pretty uncomfortable. And then they moved the clamshell and myself into the basket.
In those situations when you're injured that bad, it's going to hurt to get in the stretcher. We kind of mitigated it as best we could.
And then they strapped in the basket, and then they connected the ropes to pull me up. And
yeah, so once she got in the cradle and we got her all wrapped up with blankets and everything, then getting her up with the cradle, it was very challenging for Nick because Don kind of had to pull it out.
So bringing it up where the stretcher was getting pulled to one side, and we had to throw a line out with a small pulley system to pull the stretcher sideways as it was being pulled up.
And now all those people up above with the ropes pulling.
Moved the basket, and then they got the basket up above the overhang.
And that technical edge transition was pretty challenging. It was quite exhausting. I remember just taking a breather when I got to the top.
And then once I was above the overhang, there was 3 people on either side of the basket. So there'd be 1, 2, and 3, and then they would move it to the 4th position, and then 1 would move to the back of the line, and then 2, 3, 4, and then 2 would move to the back of the line, and the basket just moved along the trail.
As they were doing that, we had a second call come in for a missing senior in Bowser.
And I knew that Stuart was with Search and Rescue, and he happened to be my financial advisor. So I had actually said, "Stuart, is that you?" Right, which is pretty odd. And he goes, "Yes, I'm Stuart." And I said, "No, it's Maureen LaFleche. You're my financial advisor."
Pulled the stretcher up, and then we saw her get lifted up.
And then the rope technician came down, and they hooked me up. And all I could remember too is that I'm definitely afraid of heights, and it was just like, just look at the rotors, right? And they got me up into the helicopter, and then the technicians had introduced themselves to me, and then we carried on to Parksville, where we met an ambulance.
So it's very fortunate that everything lined up. We had all the resources. Everybody who did their job had the training to do it.
Back then, they got me into Nanaimo General. And I was 4 days in Nanaimo, which I don't recall too much. All of my injuries were, I have 7 titanium plates. I had a full flail chest, multiple fractures on at least 2 contiguous ribs, and mine was actually 7. And there was several near the spinal column that the surgeon couldn't access, and just because it was too close to the spinal column. And I had compression fractures in lumbar 1 and 3, and I had a burst thoracic 12. I had I had shoulder injuries, but I had a subscapular tear. According to the surgeon, my anterior serratus, which are those tiny little muscles by your ribs, he referred to them as hamburger, and they're still tender to this day. And 10 days total in the hospital, and it was during COVID. Was a whole team to basically build me back up and make me to where I am today. There are so many people that I need to thank for getting me to where I am today. My friend Marion, who came down to get me out of the water. Ray Salmon, who I've never met, who came down after Marion and assisted getting me out of the water. My friend Ike, who was able to reach 911, who then contacted Arrowsmith Search and Rescue. Arrowsmith Search and Rescue and all of the volunteers who rescued me from the gorge, with a special thanks to Don, Martin, and Nick, who were the first responders. The doctors who stabilized me at Nanaimo General, the thoracic surgeon, Dr. Baselli, who put me back together at Royal Jubilee in Victoria, my doctor, Dr. Bell, Mike and Nathan, my physios, Barry, my chiropractor, Teresa, my osteopath and acupuncturist, Anna and Hillary, my massage therapists. Lastly, but definitely not least, are all my friends and family that showed up and took turns looking after me and fed me for 2 months. I will forever be indebted to each and every one of you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really glad my friend is still here. And thank you all for making that possible.
If you're looking for a nonprofit to donate to, please consider Arrowsmith Search and Rescue or a search and rescue near you. Myself and others have benefited greatly from their service. These amazing volunteers are definitely close to my heart and a very worthy organization to donate to.